He fights hard to ascend to the throne, yet he eventually becomes the first Holy Roman Emperor to abdicate. He will pay dearly for the most powerful worldly position in Europe. He hopes to be a ruler of peace, but his rule is marked by conflict. Without his sister Maria and his wife Isabella, he would be unable to govern his empire. Stolen gold from the colonies finances his wars. One empire, one religion, and one troublesome monk. Who was Charles V, and why did he fail?
Emperor Maximilian has died.
God bless his soul.
What has happened?
Your Highness, His Majesty, the Emperor is dead.
Emperor Maximilian I has died. Who will become the new Holy Roman Emperor and ascend to the throne of Charlemagne? Maximilian's oldest nephew, Charles, Duke of Burgundy, is the apparent heir. However, in order for the 19-year-old to ascend to the imperial throne, the German prince-electors must first make him king. The young man has a powerful rival, the German prince-elector Frederick III of Saxony. King Francis I of France also hopes to become emperor.
Behold, Princess Louise of France!
He's experienced as both a king and a politician. The princes are not the only ones paying close attention to the election.
Lord, I pray that in your great wisdom,
Beautiful and exceedingly pious Isabella of Portugal has had an eye on Charles for some time. She hopes that he will ascend to the throne. Who will become Europe's new ruler? Who can provide their subjects with security and a sense of hope at a time of war and religious crisis? Who can meet the expectations people place in a Holy Roman Emperor? In the Holy Roman Empire of the German nation, prince-electors choose the king and expect rewards for their votes. The throne and crown will go to the highest bidder. Charles has a more traditional view of an emperor's role, to defend the unity of the empire and the church.
I find it fascinating that he fought so hard for the imperial crown in 1519, only to then simply give up all his worldly positions 40 years later.
Charles's empire will eventually span the world, larger than ever before. He himself refers to it as the empire on which the sun never sets. And yet, his world crumbles around him, the world he prayed and fought for, driven by the utter conviction that Catholicism was the one true faith.
It is hard to judge Charles as a person, because he was so well protected. It was not just a matter of armor or shields. In fact, traditions at the court of Burgundy served to mask the ruler's character, and even contemporaries were largely unable to go beyond the public persona.
The deceased Emperor Maximilian I and his family. After the early death of Maximilian's only son, the emperor's nephew becomes Duke of Burgundy. The duchy includes Flanders. Charles is born in Flanders in 1500, in the town of Ghent. It is a time of great piety infused with humanist impulses. Dignity and humanitarian beliefs, virtuous ideals dating back to antiquity, are rediscovered and interpreted through Christian ideology. The goal is to enter the kingdom of heaven as a good person. Growing up, Charles has to meet high expectations.
He was provided with respected, demanding tutors who placed a lot of pressure on his young shoulders. The philosophers, politicians, and father confessors wrote down precisely what he had to do, not do, and aspire to. He was tested every day.
Charles grows up in the care of his Aunt Margaret of Austria at her court in Mechelen, half a day's ride from Brussels. Every day, Margaret takes young Charles to Mass with her. The stuttering, shy child learns the oratorical skills that will come in useful as a future ruler and warrior. Charles is soon happiest at the medieval tournaments at the court in Flanders. At the time, Emperor Maximilian's daughter is governor of the Habsburg Netherlands.
Margaret was a strict woman and knew precisely what one should and should not do. Emperor Maximilian visits the Netherlands in 1509. He is Charles's grandfather and he makes a number of changes. Maximilian takes Charles away from Margaret's control and gives him his own court. He is just 9 years old at the time.
Margaret writes to her nephew almost every day, determined to maintain her influence over the Habsburg Netherlands. When she suggests that Charles's brother Ferdinand in Spain may eventually become ruler, Charles's letters turn colder.
When her guardianship ends and Charles reaches the age of majority, he begins to take away her political responsibilities. She is deeply affected by this, but he doesn't care. He now has to demonstrate that he is not some mama's boy, that he can act decisively. It's a radical break he performs without emotion. He simply pushes her aside.
In 1517, Charles's Spanish grandfather, Ferdinand II of Castile, dies. Charles arrives in northern Spain, prepared to inherit the crown of Castile and Aragon. However, the local nobles don't want a king who can't even speak Spanish. They want someone to represent them. And Charles faces resistance.
The sign of the cross, amen.
Empieza a nombrar parte de esta corte.
He distributes important positions among his Flemish entourage and sends Castile's money to his Burgundy court in Brussels. The Cortes, the nobility, fears losing its privileges and power.
Y también teme por sus puestos, su poder.
The nobles also don't want a future emperor who will have to concentrate on a vast empire. Charles demonstrates strength and has the uprisings put down. Charles also reconnects with his Spanish mother, Joanna, who he has not seen since the age of 6. He finds her powerless and confined to the court in Tordesillas. Following the death of her husband Philip, Charles's father, Queen Joanna had spent months grieving. Joanna's father, Ferdinand II, had used the opportunity to disempower her. Charles, like others, considers his mother aptly named Joanna the Mad.
Joanna was not mad. She was psychologically unstable, but also well-educated and a compelling character.
Ferdinand II had had his daughter declared unfit to rule during his own lifetime and beyond.
Finally, we are reunited, Mother. I was made to grow up far from you due to the will of others, decreed with no regard for us. And for many years, we have endured this separation.
You will kneel before your queen, my son. Forget not who you are and what is expected of you.
She was the regent, the actual queen of Castile and Aragon, until her death. Charles was merely her representative and was instructed that he could only rule with her approval.
Charles also meets his brother Ferdinand for the first time. Ferdinand had grown up in Spain, and both Joanna and the Castilian nobles would have preferred him as king.
Good day, my brother. Here. Take this as a promise of the offices you will hold during my reign as your king. We are one family. This must be clear to all.
And if I'm made emperor, I will ensure my brother is richly rewarded. He will be given positions of power, territories, and resources. And this is what Charles did. It wasn't just a vague promise that was eventually rescinded. It actually happened. Charles awarded Ferdinand the Austrian hereditary lands, made him his deputy as emperor, and then king of the Romans.
It is an age of upheaval. In 1492, Christopher Columbus reaches the American continent. Before long, ships laden with silver and gold plundered from Central and Southern America return to Europe. Greed and avarice ensue. It is the beginning of centuries of exploitation. Innumerable soldiers of fortune seize the opportunity to become rich, launching raids with religious overtones. Conquistadores like Hernán Cortés believe they are doing God's work. Cortés justifies his actions with the Catholic aspiration to convert others to pious Christians.
O Lord, show us how we can free them from the sins of Babel, and permit us to spread thine glory.
The new King Charles is in favor of converting the indigenous peoples of the new territories. To him, they are subjects in his universal Christian empire. Cortés sends letters to the young king from Mexico, celebrating his own achievements, promising great riches for the crown, and including stolen Aztec treasures as proof of his claims. Cortés already considers himself the viceroy of New Spain.
Cortés tried to convince him of this idea. You can be so much more if you take control of the great empire and the crown of the Aztecs. Then you truly would be emperor of the world.
These great plans are interrupted by news that Charles's grandfather, Emperor Maximilian, has died. Charles now has the opportunity to fulfill his lifelong goal. He considers himself the natural successor to Charlemagne and intends to unite all Christians within a single empire and defend them against all enemies from outside.
Charles really saw himself as advocatus ecclesiae, a defender of the church. No subsequent emperor ever laid claim to this responsibility again.
Charles is determined to bring peace to Europe. At a time when individual states and nation-states are breaking away and even going to war with each other, he wants to create a united European continent.
In Paris, another man has similar dreams of ruling a great empire. King Francis I of France applies to become the German king. Neither Charles nor Francis speak German. unlike Maximilian, an Austrian. Charles, however, is a Habsburg and the Archduke of Austria. He believes that this will prove beneficial in his attempts to convince the German prince-electors.
He had to spend the entire election process pretending to be a German with Germanic blood, something that many could not quite believe of the Spanish king. In addition, he couldn't speak German well at the age of 19 or 20. It was, therefore, very important that he was the Archduke of Austria, and that others were prepared to accept him as such.
This was the propaganda they used, and it was very effective. It was conveyed by the media, but also by people we would call lobbyists these days.
However, the power-hungry electors remain uncertain. They consider Francis too ostentatious.
Gentlemen, it is time to vote. Who will be
And fear Charles because of his vast power as king of the Iberian dominions and owner of American colonies.
The money from the Frenchman,
Money eventually talks. Francis offers to pay 300,000 guilders, but Charles tops his offer. He emerges victorious.
I'm no longer a candidate. My vote goes to Charles of the Habsburgs. I swear.
Francis I loses more than just the election. As Holy Roman Emperor, he had hoped to absorb the wealthy Flanders region into the French kingdom. Charles had trumped Francis's ambitions with the princely sum of 850,000 guilders, loaned by the Fugger family, German bankers and international merchants. Did they buy him the throne?
The claim that the Fugger family bought him the German crown, and therefore the Holy Roman Empire, is not entirely accurate. The greasing of palms that Charles and his opponents engaged in was normal at the time, and was certainly not the same as our modern concept of bribery.
Of course, the Fuggers funded the emperor because they wanted privileged access to power and the securities that the empire was able to provide.
Before long, Charles realizes that he is now in debt to his benefactors.
Why did the Fuggers finance his election? Because they wanted access to America.
Charles's debts force him to betray his pious ideals. The supposedly Christian treatment of the new subjects overseas is an illusion. The riches of the colonies are Charles's securities. And others pay for his debt with their lives. A monk bears witness to the atrocities. Bartolomé de las Casas was originally a conquistador until he acknowledged the injustice visited on the indigenous peoples and became their protector. Las Casas had been sending harrowing reports of violence to the royal court in Spain since 1516. His chronicle, a short account of the destruction of the Indies, is published in several languages, and the descriptions of atrocities in Charles's colonies cause an outcry across Europe. The horrifying reports from these parts of his empire weigh on Charles's conscience. After all, he had been raised in the spirit of humanism. As an emperor to all his subjects, Charles considers it his duty to ensure that the treatment of the indigenous inhabitants of his empire conforms to Christian ideals.
He learns the lessons of Las Casas and attempts to meet the responsibilities he believes he has to the populations across the Atlantic, prohibiting additional conquests. Initially, it looks like Las Casas has achieved his purpose and that the people overseas will be subject to more humane treatment and laws.
Eyewitnesses to Charles's coronation as German king in Aachen in 1520 report that there was more gold there than anyone had ever seen before. The crown of Charlemagne awaits. But the coronation is delayed. Charles has to spend 4 months waiting in Brussels because of an outbreak of the plague. Finally, he strides past the golden shrine of Charlemagne, his role model for what a Holy Roman Emperor should be.
Those not crowned in Aachen are not crowned correctly. One must take one's place on the throne of Charlemagne. Otherwise, the entire process is called into question.
As yet, Charles is not entirely Holy Roman Emperor. He must still travel to Rome to be crowned and anointed by the Pope. Even without the Pope's blessing, Charles is determined to prove himself a worthy successor to Charlemagne. He sees himself as a champion of Christianity and a guardian against its enemies.
Carlos I of Castile, then Charles V, Holy Roman Emperor, a man accustomed to battle on the front lines, a warrior. He was no palace king, reigning from his office. He ruled from his horse.
Just like the kings of the Middle Ages. However, Charles inhabits a different, globalized world, surrounded by enemies, both old and new.
For the first time, great empires stand in opposition. On the one side, there is the Western Christianity of Europe. On the other, there are the Ottomans, who have been encroaching since the end of the 15th century. These efforts have increased under Suleiman the Magnificent. It is a battle between empires and religious ideologies, between Christianity and Islam.
Because his empire is so vast, Charles is forced to spend much of his time traveling. His new power is also threatened from inside his realm. One monk has high expectations for Charles V, Martin Luther. He hopes to gain the emperor's support in his battle against the corrupt Roman Curia. Luther intends to reform the Catholic faith and worship God as he chooses. In pamphlets, he describes the Pope as a donkey and the whore of Satan. Newly invented printing presses enable Luther's Protestant writings to spread rapidly. The Augustinian monk takes full advantage of the new media, and the ideas the Roman Church deems heretical find fertile ground. Charles's greatest fear is a Christian schism. The United Church is the very foundation upon which Charles believes he stands. And yet, before long, some German princes join the Protestant camp. This poses a great danger, not just to the Roman Church, but to Charles's power within the empire. Rome exerts pressure on the new emperor, and in 1521, Charles summons Martin Luther to the Diet of Worms.
Karl V hat Luther für ein Mönchsgezänk.
Like Rome, Charles V considered Luther little more than a quarrelsome monk. He was willing to listen to Luther's position at the Diet of Worms rather than interrogate him. This was due to the fact that the imperial princes said, "My dear Emperor, if we are not prepared to listen to this voice of the common man, there may be great unrest throughout the empire." In addition, we suspect that he may recant.
I hope that you have considered your answers most carefully.
Yes. I cannot withdraw what I have written. That will go against my conscience and against the word of God. The Lord be with me.
You will not make me a heretic, monk. You may leave Worms. I will decide your fate later.
Charles V is merciful. The Pope would have had Luther burned at the stake. The monk spends the following months in hiding at Wartburg Castle, translating the Bible into German. Now, people are able to read God's word for themselves without the filter of priests or the church. Charles's concession to the German princes proves to be a political miscalculation.
Charles is known as the ruler who fought against the Protestants, but he wasn't fighting for Catholicism or the Catholic Church. He was fighting for a united Christianity. As a universal monarchy and a universal empire under the Advocatus Ecclesiae were not possible if Christians were divided.
The conquistador Hernán Cortés uses this very Christianity and its God to brutally subdue the Aztecs. In letters to Charles, Cortés claims to be doing the will of the universal emperor. Meanwhile, African slaves are now also being exploited in the sugar plantations of Central America. Las Casas continues to report back to the emperor.
Charles underestimated the significance of the colonies. England and France took advantage of this, repeatedly drawing attention to the atrocities that occurred in America. Charles had one major handicap. He had no way of enforcing his laws and decrees. If the landowners in America chose not to obey, there was nothing Charles could do from a distance.
Charles distracts himself by going hunting in Flanders, his former home, accompanied by his sister Maria. She succeeds Margaret, Charles's aunt, as regent of the Duchy of Burgundy.
They rode together and hunted with falcons. They competed to see who could ride faster. Maria wrote a lot about this in letters to Charles. "I wished you had been here this time, then we could have raced once again."
Maria is his most trusted confidant and the only person permitted to express criticism. They write often. Maria sends him medicinal herbs and warns him to rein in his quick temper before battles.
The two were tied together by a love of hunting and extraordinary political approaches. Charles was a very strategic thinker, and Maria was equally interested in politics. She often provided the necessary impetus when it came to battle strategy.
In 1525, Francis I of France joins forces with the Pope and attacks the imperial troops at Pavia in Italy. Charles's former rival apparently still bears the emperor ill will. During the battle, the French king is captured.
Leave me! The emperor will pay dearly for this. By all the saints, be gone!
Charles has his old adversary thrown in a dungeon. In order to regain his freedom, Francis will have to swear an oath of loyalty to the emperor and promise to support his fight against the Ottomans and the Reformation. Charles continues to believe in a Christian alliance under his leadership. The emperor had taken his time deciding which family to tie to his own by matrimony. Finally, Isabella, the beautiful, educated sister of the Portuguese king, becomes his wife.
Isabella knew from the beginning what she was doing. Even as a child, she had wanted to marry Charles. She knew that she was not marrying him merely to provide an heir, but that there were also significant economic and political considerations.
The former rivals on the high seas form an alliance. The naval power Portugal can afford it. Isabella's dowry is 1 million gold ducats, money that Charles desperately needs for his war efforts.
Charles falls madly in love with her. She was very beautiful and extremely cultured, and Charles was absolutely blinded by his new wife. This is clear from the honeymoon in Granada. It was to last 2 weeks, but ended up lasting 190 days, 6 months.
The honeymoon period doesn't last. Isabella is very popular with the people and assumes more and more power in Castile and Aragon. Her husband is constantly engaged in distant battles and only spends a few months with his beloved wife.
It is difficult to wield power if you've not been brought up to hold high political office. She wasn't very happy as regent and would have preferred to have Charles at her side. However, she knew who she was marrying, so...
Despite the long separations, it is a largely happy marriage. Nonetheless, Charles has a number of illegitimate children. Sometimes the emperor is away for over a year.
If Charles needed something from Isabella, he sent letters with a special emissary rather than the mail service. The letters often included instructions that they be burned, and many did end up in the flames. They contained secrets and intimate details. We know little about Charles's private life because so many letters were destroyed.
In 1527, the heir apparent and the first of the couple's 4 children is born. Philip will eventually become King of Spain. However, before long, Charles once again has to leave. His mercenaries in northern Italy mutiny when they are not paid. They launch an assault on Rome, looting and pillaging the Holy City. Charles V's reputation as a peacemaking Christian emperor is damaged beyond repair. More than ever, he needs the women in his life to prop up his reign. His wife Isabella, his sister Maria, and his aunt Margaret. They all rule in his name.
Zonder Margaretha, Isabella and Maria had hij dat.
Without Margaret, Isabella and Maria, he would never have been able to govern his empire. They maintained unity and paid attention to the situation in the individual territories, which Charles was unable to do. The women did everything they could to increase support for the emperor at the local level and keep him informed of important issues. They were very effective.
Charles governs on horseback, in an effort to connect with his subjects. He spends just a few days in most towns, but occasionally remains in significant territories for more than a year. Meanwhile, the Reformation in Germany continues to threaten the peace of the empire. A sophisticated communication network is established to spread the word of the emperor to every part of the empire, using thousands of letters. Charles helps to establish the modern postal service.
My dear brother, you write that more and more German princes are falling under the spell of this new sect. I hereby send you instructions to suppress this, as you requested. It is enough. It can no longer be tolerated.
From what we know, there are around 150,000 letters stored in various archives.
These are letters to the female regents and to his brother Ferdinand, the emperor's representative in Germany. Ferdinand increasingly sends Charles disturbing news.
There is a lot of detailed information. How is this theatre of war developing? How is the Reformation developing? How is the front against the Turks developing? How is the war with France developing? How is the Pope's unwillingness to convene a synod developing? All of these issues are discussed in the letters.
News from the overseas colonies is equally concerning. Charles is furious that continued atrocities in New Spain are damaging his image of himself as a pious Christian emperor. Hernán Cortés is accused of misappropriating silver treasure. The conquistador travels to Granada to defend himself.
Your Majesty, I am innocent. If you believe I'm a traitor, cut my head off.
Bring me proof of your innocence. And now on your feet. But I must warn you, this is the last chance you will be given.
Cortés is frustrated. He has always been a supporter of Charles and the emperor's loyal servant, but he now feels betrayed. He has grown Castile's empire with the addition of the new colonies. He led the conquests and greatly increased the wealth of the crown, but now no longer feels appreciated by Charles.
The constant traveling and the cruelty in the colonies takes its toll. Charles increasingly struggles with the burden of power. His faith gives him strength. A ray of hope arrives in 1530 when he is finally formally anointed emperor by the Pope in Bologna, 10 years after becoming king in Aachen. Charles now decides to redouble his efforts against the Reformation. Luther's growing reputation as an adversary of the Pope and a symbol of German independence from the Emperor have begun to endanger his mission of a united Christian empire. The Protestant prince-electors once again confirm their support for Charles's ideal of a universal empire at the Diet of Augsburg in 1530. But they do so reluctantly.
Charles was by no means the Pope's lackey. He actually urged the Curia and the popes to implement a process of reform. He did not want to be involved, but he really hoped that the theologians would find some way of reuniting the different sides.
Charles is older and wiser. He knows that the German princes are secretly conspiring against him. They had feared that the Spaniard would use his unlimited resources to govern the empire without their input. This fear now appears justified. In Castile and Aragon, on the other hand, Isabella has been able to secure the support of the local nobles for her husband's efforts.
These are the treasures we have collected for the battle against the dissenters to the north. We fight for a universal Christian empire. led by our emperor. And those of you who will not join the fight may leave now.
When Charles is away, Isabella lives a life of pious asceticism befitting her strict Catholic upbringing.
Charles placed all his trust in the Empress when he travelled. Both were pious and had a hunger for victory, and they increasingly complemented each other. He recognized her ability to adapt to new circumstances and to solve problems wisely. He valued her and trusted her absolutely.
Isabella remains in close contact with Las Casas, who continues to campaign desperately for humane treatment of the people in the colonies. The Empress receives a number of new reports from Las Casas and pressures her husband to strengthen the laws designed to protect the suppressed. Then the imperial couple suffers a cruel blow. Shortly after the birth of her fourth child, Isabella dies.
Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth.
Heel treurig, allemaal heel zielig. Ik denk omdat hij...
It was a terrible tragedy. He really loved her. And now he elevates her to an icon. He orders a painting of her from the artist Titian.
Haar maken door Titiaan. Hij omgeeft zich dus met alle portretten van al zijn familie.
He surrounded himself with portraits of his family. All the Habsburgs did this to display pride in their heritage. I believe Charles began to idolize Isabella after her death, as he realized the full extent of his loss.
Omdat hij ineens zag ook wat hij kwijt was geraakt.
Las Casas' greatest supporter is dead. The monk travels to Spain to speak to Charles directly. He has chosen an inopportune time.
The Indios are dying, exhausted from their suffering on the plantations. They are whipped to death by the landowners.
But Castile looks away as long as the ships laden with treasures continue to come.
Did you come here just to insult me, monk?
I come only to report the disgrace and to ask you to end it. Majesty, it is our duty as Christians to combat sacrilege and give the Indios their freedom.
Cortez has warned me about you. Yes, you are devious and conniving.
Charles has abandoned his Christian principles for money. After making peace with the French and the Ottoman Empire, he enters into a secret agreement with the Pope to silence the Protestants in Germany once and for all.
His primary goal now is to ensure that he can pay his troops. He no longer asks where the money is coming from. All that matters to him is safeguarding the strength of his army. It could be said that it was Central and Southern America's great misfortune that the Reformation erupted in Europe at that time.
Dass zur selben Zeit die Reformation in Europa ausbricht.
It is the largest army amassed on German territory so far. 35,000 imperial soldiers and 12,500 papal troops. In 1547, at Mühlberg in the electorate of Saxony, Charles goes into battle against the badly equipped and strategically inferior Protestant forces. It is Charles's greatest military success. He captures the Prince-Elector John Frederick I of Saxony sentences him to death, then pardons him. Charles has his court painter Titian depict him as a holy warrior.
Und so ist in die Schlacht gezogen.
He went into battle and he emerged victorious. This reinforced his conviction that he was following the right path and that God had tasked him with defeating the Protestant heresy. Everybody should recognize that the ruler of the Holy Roman Empire had performed a sacred duty against the heretics and that this was proof that God was on his side.
Das ist ein Beleg dafür, dass Gott hinter seinem Tun steht.
Charles's victory does not bring him peace. Despite his military prowess, his self-proclaimed mission to unite the empire in faith and defend it against adversaries and the Reformation has failed. The close-knit union of the Occident and the Roman Church has ceased to exist. The age of religious conflict is visible on the horizon. Following another war, Charles is forced to flee. He arranges a meeting with his brother Ferdinand, who wants to make peace with the Protestants.
Turn back. You're walking into a trap. The princes have the route to Innsbruck under their control.
We are one family.
Meanwhile, Ferdinand has become the German king. Against Charles's will, he convenes a diet in 1555. In future, every prince-elector will determine whether his state is Catholic or Protestant.
I urge you, flee across the Alps to the south.
And why should I believe you? You betrayed me once before.
Then don't believe me, and do as you like. But I will not permit them to take your life. You are my brother.
Charles travels to Brussels, whose realm, his religion. 1555 marks a significant change in Europe and leads to the most difficult decision of Charles's life. The injured emperor withdraws to his Flanders home to ponder his failure. Racked by gout, Charles prepares his abdication. Never before has a Holy Roman Emperor surrendered his throne.
Charles firmly believed in one rule, one faith, and that he should determine that faith. He could not, in good conscience, accept anything else. One could say that he was therefore a political lame duck at this stage. In fact, in this regard, he was never anything else. To him, the unity of Western Christianity was fundamental and non-negotiable.
The idealist is finally forced to face up to reality.
My goals were not achieved. I admit that I was sometimes led astray. I beg of those who I may have offended, forgive me.
It began on such a large scale, involving all of Europe except France and England. And then the emperor failed. At that time, perhaps at any time, it was simply not possible to implement a political project across such a vast empire. Years later, Napoleon similarly attempted to rule all of Europe. However, Europe invariably resists such efforts.
In October of 1555, after 35 years on the throne, Charles abdicates in Brussels. The empire fractures into two parts. His brother Ferdinand retains control of the Holy Roman Empire, while his son Philip rules Spain, the colonies, and the Spanish Netherlands. Charles attempts to find peace in the monastery of Yuste in Extremadura, a remote area of Castile. Daily life in the monastery follows strict rituals, and Charles hopes to recover his dignity.
He lived through an age in which everything changed. Charles V was brought up in the spirit of his ancestors, but suddenly found himself in a very different world. Everything had to be reimagined and remade. He could no longer rely on old role models.
A mission impossible.
In the last 2 years of his life, Charles is frequently visited by his family. He continues to meddle in their power struggles and matrimonial policies.
In the end, his death is caused by the tiny sting of a mosquito.
Charles dies on the 21st of September 1558, probably of malaria. Titian's La Gloria, which depicts Charles and his closest family alongside the Holy Trinity, hangs in his bedroom. Charles V was a ruler in a world experiencing an upheaval he could not prevent, despite having the full force of the Holy Roman Empire at his disposal. His medieval ideals had no place in this new world.